It was the second I heard the words, "I don't love you anymore," that I knew my life was about to take a turn I could never have imagined. The room spun, and for a moment I thought I was going to collapse right there on the kitchen floor. But I didn't. Instead, I just stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world. The woman who had been my wife for nearly 20 years. The woman who'd promised to love me until the very end. But the end had come, and it wasn't a gentle one. It was swift. It was brutal. It was the end of something beautiful that I had spent my whole life building, brick by brick. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The words kept echoing in my mind over and over again. "I don't love you anymore." It felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I never thought this would happen. Sure, things had been rocky here and there, but nothing that would lead to this. The betrayal, the hurt, the coldness in her eyes, it all started to sink in. And that's when I realized the truth had been hiding in plain sight. I want you to understand something. It wasn't just the fact that she left me. It wasn't the pain of seeing my marriage crumble. It wasn't even the anguish of realizing I had been blind to all the signs. What hurt more was knowing what was coming next. I had worked my whole life to provide for her, to create a life for us, to give her everything she wanted. And she had been taking it all without a second thought while I was left in the dark. The irony was suffocating. I thought I was the provider. I thought I was the protector, but I was. My name is Dennis, and for 50 years I played by the rules. I worked hard, paid my dues, and kept my head down. I married the love of my life, built a family, and created the kind of home that most people would envy. The kind of home that, looking back now, I would have sacrificed it all to not have. I've spent half of my life believing that family meant everything. I sacrificed my own dreams for hers. I gave up my freedom, my passions, my time, everything for her, for our kids, for the life I thought we were building together. I worked long hours, weekends, missed holidays. I thought that was what I had to do. And yet, I was the one left alone, betrayed. If you want to know why this story matters, why this pain is so raw, it's because of one thing. I had never really known her. I had never known how deep the lies went, how far the betrayal reached, how my own flesh and blood would turn against me. And that's where the story begins, the story of how everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my family, turned out to be a lie. The betrayal started small, barely noticeable, like a pebble dropped into a lake, creating ripples that grew wider with each passing year. But it wasn't until that day, the day she told me she didn't love me anymore, that I realized how much I had ignored, how much I had missed. All the little things, all the signs that screamed at me from the shadows. I'll be honest with you, I didn't see it coming. I had been blind. But the truth has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it. And when it does, it's like a punch to the gut. And trust me, it hurt. You see, it wasn't just the infidelity that stung. It wasn't just the fact that she had moved on to someone else, someone who wasn't me. What hurt the most was knowing that, all along, I had been nothing more than a tool to her, a means to an end, a paycheck. I had been so focused on providing for her, on building a life for us, that I had failed to see how little I actually meant to her. It was like I had been living in a dream, but it wasn't a dream. It was a nightmare that I had been too afraid to wake up from, and now the nightmare was real. When she walked out that door, when she left me standing there in the kitchen, I was left with nothing but the cold, empty space where our life used to be. And in that silence, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to sit around and let this happen. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had worked too hard, given up too much to be treated like this. No, I was going to make sure she regretted ever crossing me. But here's the thing, I didn't want revenge right away. I didn't want to go in guns blazing. No, I needed to think. I needed time to plot my next move. It wasn't about rage. It wasn't about getting even. It was about something deeper, something more calculated. It was about teaching her a lesson she would never forget. If you want to know what happened next, how I turned everything around, you should probably subscribe. Because trust me, the story is only just beginning. The first few days after she left, I was a mess. I didn't sleep, didn't eat, and I certainly didn't feel like talking to anyone. I spent my days walking through the house, moving from one room to another as though I was a ghost in my own life. I kept thinking about all the times I had tried to give her everything, everything I thought she needed, everything I thought would make her happy. Yet, in the end, it wasn't enough. I kept staring at the place where she had sat for so many years. The kitchen table where we had eaten meals, where we had laughed, where we had planned our future. Now it was just a table, empty and cold. The silence in this house felt deafening. She wasn't there to fill it anymore. The sound of her voice, her laughter, the way she'd used to hum while she cooked dinner, it all felt like distant memories fading fast. I told myself I would be okay. I told myself I would find a way to move on. But the truth was I didn't know how. She had been my world for so long, and now she was gone. The house, the life, it all felt hollow without her. But here's the thing no one ever tells you. Betrayal makes you stronger. It might not feel like it at first, but somewhere deep inside it changes you. It shifts your perspective, awakens something inside of you that you didn't know existed. And that's exactly what happened to me. The first person I turned to was my old friend Tom. We had been close since college, and he knew me better than anyone else. I figured I could use some advice, someone to talk to who wasn't part of my world, who wouldn't judge me for the mess I was in. When I called him, he didn't hesitate. He was at my door within an hour, bringing with him a six-pack of beer and a bag of chips. We didn't talk much that night. He just listened while I drank and vented about everything. The betrayal, the lies, how she had made me feel like I was nothing. He didn't say much, just nodded here and there, letting me unload. But after a while he stopped me, and the words he said that night changed everything for me. "Dennis, you're better than this," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "You've spent your whole life working for others, bending over backwards, but what about you? When was the last time you did something for yourself?" I had no answer. I hadn't even thought about it. I had been so wrapped up in making her happy, in trying to be the perfect husband, the perfect father. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. Tom gave me a smirk, then said something that stuck with me. "Don't let her destroy you. You have your own life to live. And if she thinks she can walk away from everything you built together without any consequences, then it's time to show her just how wrong she is." At that moment, something clicked in my brain. The fog began to clear, and for the first time in days, I felt clear. I felt like I had a purpose again. And that purpose wasn't to wallow in self-pity. It wasn't to beg her to come back. It wasn't even about winning her back. No, it was about taking back control of my life. It was about making sure that I was the one who had the upper hand in this situation. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. A few days later, I took a trip to the lawyer's office. I had been avoiding it, trying to pretend that everything was going to be okay, that I didn't need to get the courts involved. But Tom's words kept echoing in my head. It was time to protect myself. Time to make sure that what was mine stayed mine. I had worked for years to provide for our family, our home, the savings, everything. It wasn't just hers to take, but even though I knew that logically there was still a small part of me that felt guilty. I didn't want to destroy her, didn't want to hurt her more than I already had. But then I remembered how she had hurt me, how she had discarded me like I meant nothing. No, I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I was going to stand up for myself, finally. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Carla, listened carefully as I told her my story. She didn't offer much in the way of sympathy, but then again, I wasn't looking for sympathy. I was looking for action. She gave me a rundown of my options. It wasn't going to be easy, especially since we hadn't been separated long and there were no major assets at risk yet. But she promised me that, with time, we would make sure everything was in order. My money, my property, the house we had built together. Nothing was going to slip through my fingers. "Just be patient," she advised. "But remember, sometimes the best revenge is to take back what's rightfully yours and show them just how much they underestimated you." I didn't need any more convincing. I walked out of that office with a plan. It wasn't going to be quick. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had the resources, I had the drive, and I had something she didn't: time. And you better believe I was going to use it wisely. I spent the next few weeks slowly but surely putting the pieces together. Every conversation, every detail, every moment that I could use to my advantage, I took note of it. But I wasn't acting out of anger or bitterness. I was biding my time, taking a step back and watching how everything unfolded. I was preparing for my next move. If you want to know what I did next, if you want to find out how it all unfolded, then you should probably keep following this story. Believe me, the best is yet to come. It's funny how you can go from feeling like you have no control over your life to realizing that you've had the power all along. I spent so many years letting her decide everything for us: the house, the vacations, the kids' schooling. It was always about what she wanted, what she needed. I had made my peace with that, or I thought I had. But then, after she walked out, it was as if the shackles came off. I started seeing everything clearly for the first time in years. How much I had given up, how much I had sacrificed for her and for this family, and how, in the end, I was left with nothing but my own empty promises. I had been a fool. It was easy to blame her. It was easy to say that she was the one who had ruined everything. And to be fair, she was a big part of it. But if I was honest with myself, I knew that I had allowed it to happen. I had been too afraid to stand up for myself, too afraid to demand respect. I had put my family above all else, thinking that was the right thing to do. But in doing so, I had forgotten about the most important person, me. It was time for that to change. It was time to take my life back. I'd been through the motions, slowly starting to clean out the house, deciding what to keep, what to toss. There was nothing left for me here anymore. She had taken everything she wanted, and now it was my turn. But I didn't want to just move on. I wanted to make sure she understood the price of walking away from everything I had built. I wasn't just going to let her think she could take all of it with no consequences. That would be too easy, too simple. I kept thinking about how everything had been a lie. I had trusted her, loved her with everything I had. She was the woman I'd stood by through thick and thin. I had forgiven her mistakes, forgiven her flaws because I believed that family came first. But she didn't feel the same way. And now I was going to make sure she understood exactly how far her betrayal would go. I knew what I had to do. I had to make sure she couldn't escape from the consequences of her actions. I couldn't just leave things as they were. I had to show her that I wasn't going to play the role of the fool anymore. That's when I started looking into the details of our finances. The house, the loans, the investments, the accounts. We had built everything together, but I was starting to realize how little I actually knew about what we had. And more importantly, how much control I had given up. One thing that had always bothered me was how she handled the finances. She had always been the one to make decisions about the house, the savings, the investments. I had trusted her to handle it all, believing that she knew what was best. But now that I looked at things with a clearer mind, I started to realize how much I had overlooked. I spent hours going over our bank statements, our mortgage papers, the credit card bills. I had never really understood how much debt we were carrying until now. I had thought that we were doing okay until I started looking at the numbers. And that's when I found it. A small loan taken out in her name with my signature as a cosigner. It had been years since I had signed anything related to it, but I remembered the conversation. She had assured me that it was just a small loan for some home improvements, a few new appliances. But when I looked at the fine print, I realized that it wasn't just a small loan. It was a massive financial burden. The loan had been used to cover some of the renovations she had wanted, but it had spiraled out of control. And here was the kicker. She had taken out that loan behind my back. She hadn't told me about it. I had trusted her blindly, and she had kept it from me. She had been playing her own game all along, and I had been none the wiser. I knew what I had to do with that information, but I wasn't going to act hastily. No, This was something I would use at the right moment, the moment when it would have the most impact. The house was the next piece of the puzzle. We had built it together. Every inch, every corner had been planned meticulously. The foundation, the structure, the garden, the decor, it was all a product of our hard work, our dreams. But I had been blind to the fact that she had used it as a stepping stone to a better life. She had always wanted something bigger, better, and I had been the one paying the price for it. I started putting together my case. I hired a lawyer, someone who was sharp, experienced, and ruthless. I didn't need to fight dirty, no, that wasn't my style, but I needed someone who understood how to play the game, how to take what was rightfully mine and make sure it stayed that way. I wasn't about to let her take everything, not after what she had done. But as I prepared, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. This wasn't just about the house or the money. This wasn't just about proving a point. No, this was about something deeper. This was about the years I had spent in the shadows, being someone I was. This was about me finding my voice again, finding the strength I had lost somewhere along the way. And maybe, just maybe, it was about showing her just how much she had underestimated me. If you want to know how this all plays out, what comes next, you'll want to stay tuned. The truth about everything is just starting to unfold, and trust me, things are about to get very interesting. I could feel the tension building inside me like a storm just waiting to burst. Every time I thought about what she had done, every little lie, every selfish decision, it sent a shiver down my spine. But this wasn't about revenge, not in the traditional sense. It was more than that. It was about me reclaiming my life, my dignity, about making sure that the truth was known, no matter what the cost. A few weeks after meeting with the lawyer, I began taking small, deliberate steps. I made sure everything I did was calculated, every move thought out carefully. I knew I couldn't rush this. I had to be patient. I had to wait for the right moment to strike. But every day felt like a battle. The house felt different now, emptier. I could no longer walk through it and feel the warmth we once shared. It had become a monument to what I had lost. Every corner reminded me of what I had worked so hard to build, and yet every step I took within those walls made me feel like I had failed. It's strange, isn't it? The way a place you once called home can feel like a prison once everything changes. I spent my days focused on paperwork, getting everything in order. The divorce papers were just the beginning. I had to make sure she couldn't escape the consequences. I needed to protect what was mine. There was no way she could walk away and leave me with nothing, with the kids and our life's work gone in a heartbeat. She had taken her fair share, and now it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. But as much as I hated the situation, as much as I wanted to lash out, I couldn't. There were too many eyes on me now, too many people watching to see how I would react, how I would handle this betrayal. It was as if everyone knew what had happened before I even did. They could see it on my face, hear it in my voice. My entire world had crumbled, but I had to hold it together. For me, for my future. I didn't just want to win in this divorce. I wanted to make sure she understood what she had lost. She didn't just lose me, though. She lost the family, the life we had built together, and I wanted her to know that. I wanted her to feel it. That's when I made the decision to sell the house. I had never been one to make rash decisions, but this felt right. It felt like the only way I could truly start fresh. I wasn't going to let her keep it. It wasn't just about the money. It was about taking back control, about ending the chapter that had bound me to her for so many years. I listed the house without telling her. I didn't want her to have any say in the matter. I didn't need her permission. The deed was in my name. I was the one who had worked day and night to pay for it, to maintain it. It wasn't hers to take, and in doing so I sent a message. This is my life, my decision. But I didn't make the sale public just yet. I had to keep a few things close to the chest. The lawyer advised me to keep the house off the market for a little while longer, to let everything settle. The last thing I needed was her coming in, trying to manipulate the situation, trying to convince me to stay and make it work. No, I had made my decision, and I wasn't going to back down. The next few weeks were strange. I didn't talk to her much. She was still living in the guest room, still refusing to move out, even though she had already made it clear that she didn't want to stay. It was as though she was clinging to whatever she could hold on to, afraid of losing everything she thought she was entitled to. She started making more frequent calls to her lawyer, and I knew she was starting to realize the gravity of the situation. The house wasn't just mine anymore. The life we built together was starting to unravel in front of her eyes, and she had no control over it. One evening she came to me, her face pale, her eyes wide with anxiety. She wanted to talk. I could tell she was nervous, unsure of how to approach me. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should talk about the house, about what we're going to do with it." I looked at her, letting the silence stretch between us. It was like a game now, a slow, deliberate game where every word mattered. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, my voice firm. "I've already made my decision." She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. "Don't even try. You've already taken enough. It's my turn now." She didn't say anything after that. She just stood there, frozen, staring at me with that look in her eyes, the one that told me she hadn't expected me to act this way. She hadn't expected me to stand up for myself. She hadn't expected me to fight back. But I wasn't going to let her think she could walk away without any consequences. I wasn't going to let her just move on with her life as if nothing had happened. The next day, I finalized the sale of the house. The money was already starting to transfer to my account, and I felt a strange sense of relief. The house was gone, and with it, so was the last shred of the life I had built with her. But that wasn't enough. It was just the beginning. There was more to come. I had made sure of that. If you're wondering what happened next, how I made sure she couldn't just walk away, you'll want to stick around for what comes next. It's about to get a lot more interesting. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. I woke up the next morning feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. It was a strange sensation, like I had suddenly emerged from the fog, but clearer than ever. The sale of the house had been a huge step. It was a way of taking something back for myself. I could finally breathe. But as I stood in the now empty living room, my thoughts started to shift. I realized that the house wasn't the only thing I had to deal with. There were still so many other pieces of this puzzle that needed to be put together. The first thing I did was take a look at my finances. Now that the house was sold, I was free from that constant burden. But the money from the sale wasn't what I was after. It wasn't the material wealth or the house that mattered most. It was the sense of reclaiming something, of removing the final thread that had kept me tied to her. But the thing that kept running through my mind was the emotional cost of it all. I couldn't ignore the fact that for years I had been played for a fool. She had manipulated me, taken advantage of my generosity and love, and I had let it happen. That thought gnawed at me constantly. I hadn't seen her much since the conversation about the house. She was still living in the guest room, but I could feel the distance between us growing. She wasn't sure how to react. How do you deal with someone who suddenly stops being the doormat you've grown so used to? How do you handle a person who refuses to play by the rules you've set? She was still trying to get to me, I could tell. She'd make little comments when we crossed paths. Small jabs disguised as casual remarks, but I knew exactly what she was trying to do. She was testing the waters, trying to see if I would backtrack, if I would give in and fall back into the man I used to be, the one who would do anything to keep her happy. But I wasn't that man anymore, and I was going to make sure she knew it. That's when I started planning the next phase. I couldn't just let her go on living her life like nothing had changed. I had to make her understand the depth of her betrayal. I had to show her the consequences of walking out on a marriage that had lasted over 20 years. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about the lies, the deceit, the years of manipulation. I hired a private investigator. I didn't need to know everything about her life, but there were some things I needed to confirm, just to be sure. I wanted to know who she had been seeing, who had been filling the space I once occupied. And I wasn't just looking for any old affair. I needed to know if there was something more sinister going on, something deeper than just a fleeting romance. I knew I had to be careful with what I uncovered. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I needed to know the truth. The investigator did his job quickly, too quickly. It wasn't long before he had the answers I was looking for, and when I saw the photos, clear evidence of her betrayal, it hit me harder than I expected. She had been with him for months, a man I had never met, someone who had taken the place I thought I still held in her life. But what was worse was the realization that she had planned it all out. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some fleeting affair. This had been deliberate. She had been planning her escape for months, making sure everything was in place before she made her move. But the real kicker came when I found out who this man was. He wasn't some random guy she had met. No, he was someone from her past, a man she had known years ago, before we even met. The private investigator uncovered everything, from their old relationship to their secret meetings while we were still married. This wasn't just a betrayal of me, it was a betrayal of everything we had built together. The foundation of our entire relationship had been a lie. It was infuriating, but in a strange way, it also gave me the clarity I needed. I wasn't just fighting for money or property anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for the man I used to be, for the person I had let her turn me into. I wasn't going to let her get away with destroying everything without understanding the depth of her actions. I needed to hit her where it would hurt the most. I began planning my next move. I wasn't just going to let her leave quietly. No, I would make sure she knew that what she had done would not go unpunished. I would make sure that the truth came out, and I would make sure it came out on my terms, not hers. I started by organizing everything I had learned, the pictures, the dates, the evidence. I kept it all in a folder, meticulously sorted. I wanted to make sure that when I revealed it, it was undeniable, irrefutable. I wasn't going to let her spin some tale that painted me as the villain. No, she was the villain here. She had orchestrated everything. And now it was time to show her just how far I was willing to go. The next time I saw her, it was on a Sunday afternoon. She had come into the living room looking like she wanted to talk, but I wasn't interested in talking. I had no interest in hearing her excuses, hearing her justify what she had done. I looked at her coldly. "You know, I've been thinking about what you did, and I've been thinking about what I'm going to do next." She blinked, caught off guard by my sudden directness. She probably thought I would still be weak, still be the man who would beg for her forgiveness. But I wasn't that man anymore. "You've made your choices," I continued, "and now I'm going to make mine." I watched as her face shifted, the realization dawning on her. The nervousness, the uncertainty, it was all there. She knew I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Her voice faltered. "What do you mean, Dennis?" I smiled, the calm of it almost terrifying. "I mean, it's time for you to face the consequences. I hope you're ready." And that was the moment it all started to click for her. She had underestimated me, thought she could walk away from everything without any fallout. But I had been planning, and now the game was on. If you want to know what happened after that, how I made sure the truth was revealed, then stick with me. Things are about to take a turn you won't see coming. Believe me, you don't want to miss this. The weeks following that conversation were tense. I could feel her trying to regain control, trying to turn the tide back in her favor. But it was too late. She had already made her choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. And I wasn't going to show any mercy. She began to play the part of the victim. The calls increased, though they were more subtle now. She would try to speak to me about the kids, about logistics, trying to get me to soften up. But I didn't want to talk about the kids. I didn't want to talk about anything anymore. I had already made my mind up. I wasn't interested in her excuses. She tried everything. She started to say things like, "I never meant for things to go this way, Dennis," and "You know I still care about you, even if things ended badly." But I saw through it all. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to emotionally manipulate me, make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. She didn't know it yet, but I was already executing my plan. I wasn't going to let her walk away without the full weight of her actions coming back to her. This wasn't about getting revenge for the sake of it. It wasn't just about a sense of bitterness or rage. It was about her understanding the cost of what she had done. I had spent too many years putting her first. I had spent too many years ignoring the signs, ignoring the way she had taken advantage of me. I had spent too many years loving someone who never really cared about me. But now, I was going to make her see things clearly. I was going to make sure she understood exactly how wrong she had been. I knew she wouldn't back down without a fight, though. I knew she would try to use the kids, try to paint me as the bad guy. But I was prepared for that. I spent the next few days setting up the next step in my plan. I was gathering everything I had on her. The photos, the text messages, the bank statements, and the damning evidence of her affair with the man from her past. I had it all laid out carefully. It wasn't enough for her to lose the house or the money. I wasn't going to let her walk away as though nothing had happened. The truth needed to be out there. The people who had been a part of her life, her family, her friends, needed to know who she truly was. I was going to make sure she faced the consequences, but in a way she wouldn't expect. It was about getting the truth out there, making sure it wasn't swept under the rug. She had tried to control the narrative for too long. She had lied and manipulated, painted herself as the innocent one in all of this. But it was time for that to end. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. I knew that if I revealed everything to her family, it would have an impact. Her parents were well connected in the community, and they had always been critical of me. They had always thought I wasn't good enough for their daughter. They had never truly accepted me. But they were still family, and I knew she would care about what they thought. So I made a few phone calls. I contacted a couple of her closest relatives, her cousin, who was always at the family gatherings, and her aunt, who had always been the one to say that family sticks together. I told them a version of the story, carefully picking out the details that would paint her in the worst light possible. I made sure they understood the gravity of what had happened. I wasn't just telling them about her affair. I told them about the lies, the manipulation, the way she had systematically pushed me aside while she focused on her own selfish needs. And then I asked them one simple thing, to share the truth with the rest of the family. They didn't hesitate. They were angry, rightfully so, and they understood the weight of what I was telling them. They agreed to help. They agreed to make sure everyone knew the truth about what had really happened. A few days later, I received a call from her mother. I could tell she had been stewing over the things I had said. She wanted to know why I hadn't come to her first, why I hadn't spoken to her directly instead of going through other people. But by the time she called, it was too late. I knew what I had done was necessary, and I knew she wasn't going to be happy about it. But that was the point. She had never cared enough to involve me in her life, to make me feel like I was part of the family. Now, she was going to feel the consequences of her actions. When we spoke, she asked me, "Why are you doing this, Dennis? You've been through enough. You don't need to make things worse." I couldn't help but laugh a little at her words. "I'm not making things worse, Elaine. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. You can't keep covering up for her." I heard a long pause on the other end of the phone. Then she sighed. "I didn't know about any of this, Dennis. I didn't know the full story. But I'm not going to let you destroy everything now. She's my daughter." I wasn't looking for her forgiveness, not anymore. "It's too late for that," I said. "But I'm not the one destroying everything. She is." I hung up the phone and let the silence settle around me. There was no going back now. It wasn't just about her anymore. This was bigger than that. It was about showing her that there were consequences for her actions. I wasn't going to let her take everything I had worked for and walk away unscathed. I was going to make sure the world knew the truth, and I wasn't going to stop until it was clear that I wasn't the only one who had been wronged. As the days passed, the weight of everything I had uncovered started to sink in. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I had to make sure that everyone knew exactly who she was, and the time was coming soon when I would reveal it all. If you want to know what happened after that phone call, how everything unfolded from there, then you're going to want to stick with this story. Trust me, the final steps of this plan are going to be more than satisfying. I'm about to take everything back, finally. The following weeks felt like a slow unraveling of everything I had once known. I had taken control, but in doing so, I had opened a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. The truth was out there now, and the consequences of what I'd done were beginning to ripple out into the lives of everyone involved. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people who had been part of this story from the beginning. The family I had once thought of as mine. Her mother and father had been the first to react, predictably. They were livid, defensive, trying to protect her at all costs, but I didn't care. I had made my peace with it. They had been part of the problem for too long, letting her get away with things that I never should have tolerated. They had their own blind spots, their own biases about who was right and who was wrong. But now they were faced with the consequences of enabling their daughter's betrayal. I could hear it in her mother's voice every time she called. The denial, the anger, the disorientation. It didn't matter. The ball was already rolling and nothing they said could stop it now. But the truth was, I wasn't just after her family's approval anymore. That ship had sailed. What mattered now was making sure she faced the full weight of her actions. The people in her life, the ones she had manipulated, the ones who had always been kept in the dark, needed to know the truth. And it wasn't just her affair that I wanted exposed. No, it was everything she had taken from me. The years of silence, the emotional distance, the financial manipulation, and the lies she'd built around our life. It was all coming out piece by piece. I had already contacted the lawyer. The divorce proceedings were progressing steadily, but there was one thing I needed to finalize before the deal was done: the public exposure of everything I had uncovered. I wasn't going to let her slip away without being held accountable. This wasn't just going to be a quiet divorce. No, this was going to be a spectacle, a reminder to her and everyone around her that actions had consequences. I had spent so long sitting in silence, taking what was dished out to me, but not anymore. Now I had the power, and I wasn't afraid to use it. It started with her friends. I knew they had no idea about the affair, no idea about the emotional manipulation. They thought she was the victim, the woman who had been wronged, abandoned by her heartless husband. They saw me as the man who was too proud, too stubborn to make things work. But that was the illusion she had created, and it was time to tear it down. I reached out to her closest friend first. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. This was the person who had stood by her side through everything, the person who had always been in her corner. I needed to make sure that she understood what had really been going on. We met at a cafe, and I could see the skepticism in her eyes the moment I sat down. She didn't know why I had asked to meet. She didn't know what was coming. I wasn't sure if I was prepared for what I was about to do, but I had already come too far to back down now. "Rachel, I need you to listen to me," I said quietly, my voice steady. "Everything you've been told about me, about our marriage, it's been a lie, and I'm going to make sure you understand why." She frowned, clearly confused. "What are you talking about, Dennis?" I took a deep breath, my hands clenched around the coffee cup. This wasn't easy, but she needed to know. "I'm not the villain in this story. I've never been the villain. Your best friend, my wife, has been lying to you, and I'm about to tell you the truth. The whole truth." I told her everything, about the affair, about the manipulation, about the secret meetings, the lies she'd told me, the money she had spent behind my back. Rachel sat in stunned silence, her mouth open in disbelief. "I don't expect you to believe me right now," I said, my voice cold. "But I want you to know the truth. She's been playing all of you, and you've all been too blind to see it." The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel didn't know what to say. She just stared at me as though she couldn't process the information. I knew it was too much for her to take in all at once, but I wasn't asking for her forgiveness. I wasn't asking for anything, really. I was just making sure that the people she cared about understood what had been going on behind closed doors. "You have no idea how deep this goes," I said, standing up to leave. "But I'm not going to let her walk away from this without facing the consequences." I left the cafe without looking back. I knew I had done what was necessary, but I also knew there would be fallout. I could already hear the whispers in the background, the ripple effect of the truth spreading through her circle. It wasn't just Rachel who would hear about it. It was everyone. Her friends, her family, the people who had once thought she was the picture of grace and integrity. The thing about lies is that they have a way of coming to light when you least expect them to. And when they do, they don't just destroy the person who told them. They destroy everything they've worked to build. The house of cards comes crashing down, and there's no one left standing. But I wasn't done. This was just the beginning. Now I had to deal with her parents. I didn't expect them to understand. I didn't expect them to suddenly see the error of their ways. But I knew they would be affected by what I had uncovered. And that, in and of itself, was enough. As I prepared to tell them everything, I couldn't help but wonder, what would it take for her to finally understand? Would she ever realize the full extent of what she had done? Or would she just continue to play the victim, pretending like she had done nothing wrong? If you want to know what happened when I confronted her parents, how it all came to a head, you'll want to stick around. This story is far from over. And trust me, the next chapter is going to be one you don't want to miss. When I left Rachel's cafe, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It wasn't the relief I had expected. It wasn't like I'd won some great battle, but it was something. I had taken another step in exposing the truth, and it felt like the world was finally starting to hear me, even if only in whispers. But the hardest part was still ahead. Her parents. The ones who had always treated me like I wasn't good enough. The ones who had never really accepted me as part of their family. I didn't expect any sympathy from them, not after everything had unfolded. In fact, I almost didn't care about their reaction anymore. What mattered now was that they finally knew the truth. I could feel the anger rising in me as I thought about how much they had enabled her. They had always been so protective of her, so blind to the things she had done. They had never once questioned her, never once held her accountable. They just blindly supported her decisions without ever seeing the damage it caused. But this time it was different. I wasn't asking for their approval. I wasn't asking for anything from them. I wasn't going to sit and beg them to understand. No, I was going to stand my ground just as I had been doing for the past few months. They would have to hear the truth, and they would have to deal with the consequences of their own ignorance. It was a few days later when I finally called her mother. The tension was palpable even over the phone. I had been dreading this call, knowing exactly how it would go, but there was no avoiding it. "Elaine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk." There was a pause on the other end. "What's this about Dennis?" I could hear the defensive edge in her voice, the one I had come to recognize over the years. She wasn't going to make this easy, but that was fine. I wasn't looking for easy. "I know you've heard rumors about what's been going on," I said, "but you haven't heard the whole story, and I think you deserve to know the truth." There was another long pause, and I could tell she was bracing herself for what I was about to say. "What are you talking about, Dennis?" I wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. I didn't owe her that. "Your daughter has been having an affair, a long one, with a man she knew before we even met, while we were married, while you all sat at your family dinners and pretended everything was fine. She's been lying to you, lying to all of you." Her voice went cold, distant. "That's not true, Dennis. You're just angry." "Elaine, don't do this," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Don't defend her. I have the evidence. I have the photos, the messages, everything. She's been playing you all, and it's time you saw it for what it is." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, slow and measured, as if she was trying to process everything. I waited, letting her think about what I had said. "You don't know what you're talking about," she finally said, her voice faltering. "I'm not going to listen to this. I won't." But I wasn't backing down. "You need to hear this, Elaine. You've been blinded by your love for her. You've enabled her for years. You've let her get away with things that shouldn't have been allowed. And now you're going to have to face it." There was a long, strained silence. I could hear her trying to collect her thoughts, trying to come up with a way to push back. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no way to erase it. "You can't just ruin her life like this," she finally said, her voice trembling. "She's my daughter. You've done enough." I laughed bitterly. "I didn't ruin anything, Elaine. She did. She made the choice. She's the one who betrayed me, betrayed all of us. And now she's going to have to face it. It's not just about her anymore. It's about the years I've lost, the things I've sacrificed for her. This isn't just a mistake anymore. This is a pattern, and it's time for everyone to know what she's really like." I let the silence settle between us again. "I just wanted you to know the truth, and I'm done pretending like everything's okay." With that, I hung up. The conversation had been brutal. I knew it had torn her apart, and I knew she wasn't ready to hear it. But it wasn't my job to make her feel better. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. I had lived my life trying to make her happy, trying to keep the peace, trying to fit into a family that never accepted me. Now it was time for her to face the truth, just like everyone else. I spent the next few days in a strange kind of calm. There was no more guessing, no more wondering. The cards were on the table. Her family was starting to realize the depth of the situation. They had been in the dark for too long, and now they couldn't ignore it. But it wasn't over, not by a long shot. The final piece of my plan was still in motion, and this was just the calm before the storm. I was preparing for the final confrontation, the moment when everything would come crashing down. I wasn't going to leave any stone unturned. This wasn't just about exposing her to her family. This was about making sure that everyone who had ever doubted me, everyone who had looked at me like I was the problem, understood the real story. Her betrayal would be known. The manipulation, the lies, the way she had built a life on my sacrifices, everyone would hear it. And when they did, they would see her for who she really was. The hardest part was yet to come, her reaction. She had always thought she could control the narrative, that she could walk away without anyone seeing the truth. But now, the truth was coming for her. If you think this is the end, you're mistaken. The real showdown is just about to unfold. Stick with me. You won't want to miss how this all comes together. The days following my call to her mother were like a pressure cooker slowly building toward its inevitable explosion. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable. The wheels were in motion, the truth was being spread, and now there was no stopping it. I knew it wouldn't be long before she tried to reach out to me, to apologize, to justify her actions. But it was too late for apologies. She had crossed a line, and the consequences were coming. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was in control. For so long, I had been the passive participant, the one who let everything happen to him. But now I was the one dictating the terms. But even as I felt that satisfaction, the inevitable unease settled in. I had exposed her, but the final confrontation was still waiting for me. I hadn't seen her since I made my last move, and I knew she was stewing over everything that had happened. She wasn't the kind of person who would just let things go. No, she would fight. She would fight hard to maintain the life she had built on lies. The thing that terrified me most was how she would try to manipulate the situation. She would turn the tables, try to paint herself as the victim. She had always been good at that, at twisting the narrative to make herself appear innocent, even when the evidence was right in front of her. But this time, she wouldn't have the upper hand. Not anymore. It was late one evening when the text came. The message was simple, just 2 words: "We need to talk." I hadn't seen her face to face in weeks, and I knew this was coming. She had always been the type to try and repair things through words, through manipulation, but I wasn't going to fall for it this time. I didn't respond immediately. I needed to keep the upper hand. I waited a day, letting the tension hang in the air, just long enough to make sure she knew I wasn't jumping at the chance to speak with her. But eventually, I agreed to meet. She suggested we meet at the park where we had gone on our first date, the place where everything had seemed perfect between us. It felt almost symbolic, like she was trying to pull me back into the past, back to a time when things were simpler. But I wasn't that person anymore, and she needed to realize that. The meeting was set for late afternoon, just before sunset. I arrived early, sitting on a bench, watching the families walk by. The calm of the park felt like the calm before the storm. It had been a long time since I had felt this kind of anticipation, like something big was about to happen, something that would change everything. When she arrived, I could see it in her face. She was trying to appear calm, trying to act like she had it all under control. But I could see the cracks. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't been sleeping. She looked like someone who had been fighting a battle she didn't want to lose. "Dennis," she said, standing in front of me, her voice soft. "We need to talk." I didn't stand up, didn't even look her in the eye at first. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. "I'm listening," I said, my voice flat. She took a seat next to me, close but not too close. She was trying to maintain some distance, but I could feel the desperation in her. "I know I've messed up," she began, her voice cracking just slightly. "I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I turned my head slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time. "No, you didn't mean for any of this to happen, but you made choices. Choices that had consequences. You're not the victim here, and you're not going to talk your way out of this." Her eyes widened. She wasn't expecting this kind of response. She was used to me softening, used to me letting her off the hook, but I wasn't that person anymore. "Dennis, please," she said, her voice full of emotion. "I made a mistake, a big one, but you need to understand, I never wanted this to happen. I never meant to hurt you." I couldn't stop the bitterness from rising in my chest. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I didn't see it? All the little things you did behind my back, all the lies you told me for years. I was a fool to believe you, but I'm not a fool anymore." Her face hardened, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I don't know what you want from me, Dennis. I can't undo what I've done, but I'm asking for a chance to make it right, to fix what's been broken." I shook my head. "You don't get it. There's no fixing this. It's not about forgiveness. It's about the years I lost, the life I thought we had. You can't just throw that away and then expect everything to be okay. You can't just erase what you did." The words were coming faster now, the anger bubbling up. "You've destroyed everything. You used me, manipulated me, and now you're sitting here asking for a second chance, after everything." She looked down at her hands, her face flushed with shame. "I don't know what else to say, Dennis. I can't take back the things I did, but I'm sorry. I truly am." I stood up, the weight of everything crashing down on me. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo the damage you've caused. You broke me, and now you're trying to act like it was all some misunderstanding." I looked down at her, my voice cold. "It's too late for that." There was silence for a long moment. Neither of us spoke. I could feel her eyes on me, searching for any hint of softness, any opening where she could slip through. But there was nothing. There was no way back from this. "I'm done," I said finally. "I'm done pretending everything is okay. I'm done being the person who lets you get away with everything. This is over. You're not going to get away with this anymore." With that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. The conversation was over, and so was the game she had been playing. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't over yet, but I had taken the final step, and now there was no turning back. The truth had been laid bare, the lies exposed, and everything she had built on deceit was crumbling. But this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about me taking back my life. If you want to know how this ends, how everything comes to a head, then keep watching. The final chapter is coming, and it's one you won't want to miss. The days after that conversation felt surreal. I had expected some sense of closure, some final moment of relief where the weight of everything would simply lift off my shoulders. But it didn't happen like that. Instead, there was a strange emptiness that settled in, an eerie calm that I couldn't quite shake. I had done everything I set out to do, but in the quiet moments the lingering question still haunted me. Was it enough? As the divorce proceedings continued, I found myself staring at the house we had once shared, now completely empty. No more echoes of her laughter, no more footsteps on the stairs. The house felt like a ghost of the past, a monument to everything I had lost. But it also felt like freedom. A kind of painful freedom, yes, but freedom all the same. It wasn't long before I started getting calls from her family. Her parents mostly. Her mother in particular had been desperate to talk to me, to try and make amends. But there was nothing to say anymore. I had said what needed to be said, and I wasn't interested in rehashing the past. She wasn't going to get the satisfaction of seeing me broken, of seeing me fold. I ignored the calls at first. I wasn't going to let them guilt me into feeling bad for the choices I had made. But one evening I caved. It was her mother again, calling me for the fourth time in 2 days. This time I picked up. "Dennis," she began, her voice shaky like she wasn't sure what to say, "I know you're angry, but you have to understand she never meant to hurt you. She's lost without you." I laughed bitterly. Lost without me? How convenient. After everything she did, after everything she took, she's lost. I don't think that's how it works, Elaine. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she said quietly, "She's been asking about you. She doesn't know how to fix this." I felt a surge of anger. Fix it? She's had plenty of time to fix things, Elaine. She chose this. She made this mess. It's not my responsibility to clean it up. Her mother didn't respond. I could hear her breathing, and I could almost hear the heartbreak in her silence. "I just don't want you to walk away hating her, Dennis," she finally said, her voice cracking. "I'm not the one who's destroyed this family, Elaine," I replied, my tone cold. "I didn't break anything. I'm not the one who betrayed the trust that was built over 20 years. There was nothing left to say. I hung up, the finality of the action echoing in my mind. This was over. She was gone, and I wasn't going to waste any more time trying to fix something that was beyond repair. As the divorce proceedings wound down, the settlement was finalized. The house was officially sold, the money was divided, and the papers were signed. I had lost a lot, emotionally, financially, but I had gained something far more valuable: my peace. The constant noise, the constant game she had been playing, it was all gone, and in its place was a quiet, brutal clarity. But even with all of it behind me, I couldn't help but wonder, was there any way she would ever understand what she had done? I didn't think she would ever truly grasp the pain she caused. The lies, the betrayal, they were too deep for her to acknowledge. But maybe that was part of it. Maybe some people never truly understand the damage they do until it's too late. A few months passed in what felt like a blur. I focused on rebuilding my life, my business, my own sense of self. I took a trip to the mountains to clear my head, spent time doing things that made me feel alive again. I had forgotten what it was like to have hobbies, to just be Dennis without the weight of her or the family hanging over me. It felt good. But there were days when I would still think about her, about what might have been if she hadn't thrown it all away. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether I had done the right thing, but I didn't let those moments consume me. I had to remind myself, I didn't ruin this. She did. Then one day a letter arrived. It was from her. It wasn't a long letter, and it wasn't filled with apologies as I had expected. It wasn't the desperate plea I had assumed it would be. Instead, it was a simple, blunt acknowledgement of everything that had happened. "I know what I did. I know I can't take it back. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I regret everything. I will carry that regret for the rest of my life. I hope one day you can find peace." I read the letter once, twice. I felt nothing. I didn't feel anger and I didn't feel sorrow. I just felt nothing. She had said everything I needed to hear, but it didn't change anything. The damage was done and there was no undoing it. I put the letter down, then burned it. As the flames consumed the paper, I felt a final sense of closure, like the last chapter of the book had been written. I had done what I needed to do, and now I could finally move forward. I didn't need her apology, and I didn't need her to understand. What mattered now was that I had reclaimed my life. I had found myself again. The man who had been trapped in that toxic cycle for so long was gone, and in his place was someone who understood his own worth. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was mine to walk, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. As for her, I didn't know what would happen to her, and frankly, I didn't care anymore. The revenge wasn't in the way I hurt her. It wasn't about making her suffer. No, the revenge was in the way I took back my life, in the way I refused to let her control my future. And that was the most satisfying part of all. If you've stuck with me this long, thank you. This story was never just about revenge. It was about redemption. And sometimes the best revenge isn't about what you do to someone else. It's about what you do to yourself.